Good morning, and thank you for attending our seminar this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to join you this morning on International Women's Day for what I hope will be a sustained series of events of inspiring women discussing their incredible careers, transformative experiences for us all to imbibe, be inspired and encouraged by, and equally importantly, with a view to inspire the next generation of students, I think, which has led to over 100 questions that have been submitted to the panel for today's session. So that's just incredible, and thank you all very much for your participation. The questions we've got are from our students. They themselves are, quite inspiring, and they represent truly the inquiry and energy we expect from our student community on the issues of the day, and them holding the board and the college to account in respect of how we tackle these and the formidable issues we are challenged with today. So I thank you all, students, for your perceptiveness, for your thoughtfulness, and for the challenge that you've placed before us all. Speaking for myself, if I may, I'm a father of two amazing daughters, one of whom is an alumni already. The other graduates in the summer of 2021. And I have, in my professional and personal life, been, I hope, an incredible ally for women in every aspect of how I live my life, particularly in respect of taking responsibility to end the pattern of injustice, which is gender inequity. My wife has been an strong, ardent, passionate supporter and believer in respect of encouraging me in this journey. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful to her and to our amazing daughters. I'm also additionally very pleased to report to you all that under my tenure currently, the UWCSEA board has now reached gender parity. It is something that we are all incredibly proud of, and Caroline will share more on this a little later. So thank you very much for your effort, for your support, and for your participation, Caroline. I wish this event every success with your important dialogue with the students, and look forward to viewing the recording of this event with my family a little later today. What I would like to do at this particular point in time is once again thank you for your incredible support. Thank you for the learnings and the support, and equally importantly, the motivation and the inspiration you provide to us all. And it's an absolute privilege to provide some of these opening comments to you today. At this time, I'd like to truly reflect upon the incredible journey and the role of women in our society, at our homes, at our workplace, and the incredible, truly incredible, persuasive focus and encouragement they bring us all. So thank you all, inspiring women. Thank you all for allowing us to be a part of today's seminar. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to another inspiring lady and a woman, Carma, our college president. So with that, let me hand over to you, Carma, if I may. Thank you all again.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Madan, for those words and for standing up as an ally for women in all that you do. So I'd like to welcome everybody here today. I'm Carma, I'm the college president, and I'm just about 18 months into my journey with the college. This lunchtime, we're here with a panel, as Madan said, of inspiring women, and one of the inspirations for today's event was we're at what I call Beijing plus 25. It's 25 years on from the commitments that were made at the historic UN conference in Beijing in 1995 on the question of women's equality. I thought it would be an interesting time, International Women's Day, to reflect on where we are now and what we're aiming for in the future. That, of course, is the conference where Hillary Clinton famously said, "Women's rights are human rights." This session will be a panel discussion to explore this interesting topic on this very interesting and special day. We will also be exploring the impact of COVID-19 on women in particular and on progressing key women's equality issues. Gender-based violence, inability to access contraception, essential health services, and challenges to balancing family, work, and school responsibilities have all increased during this period. We're going to be exploring some of the challenges and opportunities, in fact, that the pandemic has provided, particularly in respect of women. We'll also have lots of questions submitted by our students, as Madan said, largely from their service groups, which is fantastic. So the ongoing work that they're doing in the college, and from the staff that support the students in this respect. And just a little word on who those students and staff are. On the East Campus, it's the Middle School Daraja Group, the Focus Group Generation Education Period, GEP, and their inspiring teachers, Melanie Wilson, Erin Robinson, and so many others. And you'll forgive me for not mentioning everybody who sent in questions. If I've forgotten you, my omission is regretted. And on Dover, the Global Concerns Executive, which is a group of very inspiring young women. In particular this year, it is all women who are standing together to discuss these incredible issues and the concerns that they have. And also the work that Susan Edwards did on Dover campus to bring people together. So let me introduce our panelists, joined here today by Her Excellency Margriet Vonno, the Ambassador of the Netherlands to Singapore and Brunei, Caroline McLaughlin, the Lead of Partnerships for AVPN in Singapore, Dr. Aisha Khanna, co-founder and CEO of ADDO AI. And as we go through, we'll have the opportunity for a dialogue and answering the questions. I will provide fuller introductions to our panelists shortly, but I feel I should add just a few quick housekeeping matters just to keep us straight. So this will be a moderated panel discussion. We're due to finish well before 1:15 today. I know some of our panelists have a very hard stop. We have a team monitoring the question and answers, so please do submit your Q&A if you would like to throughout. And we will try to answer questions coming in, but as we heard before, we've already had 100 or so submitted already. What we will do is we will take the questions, of course. We're recording this session, and for those who submitted before or during the panel session, we will come back to you in writing afterwards to take these very important issues. We don't want to leave them unanswered either. So we will be sharing this later on our website as well. So those who weren't able to join or who wish to look at some of the discussion with their families, as Madan said later, will be able to do so through the website as well. So joining us today, we have students, staff and parents from across our community. So I would very much like to thank you all and welcome you all. We have some students who submitted questions who are doing their mock exams and they won't be joining us. I think they'll be joining us through the recording later. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce Margriet. Margriet is the Ambassador of the Netherlands to Singapore and Brunei. And as a young diplomat, she was involved in preparing her country's delegation for the conference in Beijing. And now as an ambassador is strongly promoting equity and women's rights here in Singapore. We're interested in hearing from you as someone who was involved in this major moment at the time. What was the significance of the Beijing conference and the commitments made back in 1995? And once the commitments were made, where did you think we would be now? So over to you, Margriet.
Thank you so much, Carma, and it's really a pleasure being at this distinguished panel. And yes, I was a very young diplomat when I started my journey as a diplomat in 1991, and I was tasked to go to the Commission on the Status of Women. I thought at the time at the United Nations it would be one of the highest ranking commissions, but actually it wasn't. It was just a lower part of the totem, but I loved my work there, and I already understood it was part of the human rights. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the Beijing conference myself because I was posted to Brussels at the time doing something completely different, as sometimes is the case in diplomacy, but I always followed it. There were chairs when I was at the Commission from Egypt and from Mexico, and boy, were they frightening. They were really impressive ladies, and I had never was used to any impressive lady being a boss. So that was the first stop in my journey, which helped me to get some female role models. And what was also very welcome is that it was global, that you thought it's not just me, it's all over the world. And there were different examples and different outcomes. But it felt really empowering, and it still does. If I then look at some of the ladies I knew who were very active during the Beijing time, I think they will be a little bit disappointed because they were quite pushy. And I think we're doing much better than at 1995, but not that we already are at the gender parity level as now is the case in the board of UWC Dover. So, and Tampines. So I think we can learn from what we've been doing, but now it's normal. Actually, International Women's Day is maybe one of the most celebrated days of all the UN days. And a lot of people know what the 8th of March is about. 25 years ago, it was less. And now it's much more about the new normal. And what I see, if I look at us on the panel, there are so many female role models now that you don't have to really look for them before you find one. It's part of life, and we can do better, but I'm sure that the students at UWC will aspire to do better even than we are doing. So I'm quite positive about our future.
Thank you, Margriet. Forgot to unmute myself. That was a really interesting perspective of how it was then. And I like the fact that I think it's very important you described those women as being pushy. I think in those days you had to be pushy to get some of the issues out there, I think, around respecting the conferences and the considerable contributions that were being made from across the globe. It meant pushing oneself forward. And in fact, the theme of International Women's Day this year, I think, is challenge, that idea that we're still challenging and pushing those issues forward. So, of course, we're all aware that we're finding ourselves in unprecedented times, and COVID-19 is a threat, very much is seen as a threat to progress on women's equality, and threatens indeed to set women back further. To give you a sense of the extent of the impact, I thought I would just highlight some of the likely consequences of the pandemic on women and girls, as drawn from Think Global Health. These are issues such as gender-based violence, which has skyrocketed during the pandemic. COVID-19 is likely to slow progress towards the goal of ending that gender-based violence before 2030 by a third. So, really, decelerating some of the fantastic work that was going on there. It could contribute, it is thought, to an additional 13 million child marriages over the next decade because of the economic impact that COVID is having around the world. Disruption to health services in particular could prevent 47 million women from accessing modern contraceptives, something that we've started to take for granted, potentially leading to 7 million unintended pregnancies. Women make up 70% of the health and social sector and are feeling the disproportionate impact of COVID through their work and through the impact on their families. COVID-19 recovery and response plans can only be effective if they properly address the needs of women and girls and ensure that sexual and reproductive health and rights are prioritized. Of course, those are just some headlines, and there are many, many more areas where the impact on women is seen to be disproportionate to the impact on men. It is clear that women must also have the power to participate in decision-making and leadership at all levels in order to be able to address some of those, or in fact, all of those areas. So being part of the discussion, but particularly being part of the decision making. And it is in the matter of leadership that we're going to explore a little bit more now with Caroline. Caroline has been promoting, as we heard from Madan, the work to ensure women are represented in leadership positions right here at SEA in her position as a governor. In her role as the lead of partnerships for AVPN and as a UWCSEA Governor, Caroline has been very active doing an important piece of research to increase the gender diversity of the board in particular, but wider diversity too. And we do indeed now have equal numbers of men and women on our board. Caroline, are you able to share with us some of what you have learned and the work you've been doing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Karma. It's wonderful to be able to have this opportunity to talk about, I think, the work of one of the key stakeholder groups in the college, which is the school board. What I would say is when we started to look at the statistics, it was around the bigger piece of work that the school was doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that the world, that 2020 was an impetus for that work. I think a combination of COVID, the impact of COVID on women, George Floyd, the reaction across the world to that inequality meant that over the summer, the college also has started a bigger work around this piece. And, from the board perspective, it was important that we also understood where we could lead in this work. And, in looking at the statistics, over the last 25 years, when Beijing, when Hillary Clinton was talking in Beijing, there was only 27% of women on the board at UWC. And actually, over the last 25 years, even though that number has improved, it wasn't until this year that we were really able to tackle it. And I think what I would say is, Carl, what we learned was you need to be intentional about what you're trying to achieve. And I think that in this case, the board was intentional about the importance of gender diversity on the board and how we needed to show that, as a school and as a college, as a board, that we were determined and committed to this. So I'm pleased to say that right now it sits at 50% women and men on the board. And I think that it's a tribute to that intentionality that we were able to achieve that.
Thank you, Caroline. A really important point there about being deliberate and intentional in one's actions to address what are often quite long-standing issues, but also ones in which people want to come together to make the change happen as well. So it's now my pleasure to turn to Dr. Ayesha Khanna. And really, in thinking about today, wanted very much also, as well as the challenges, some of which we've referenced so far, the impact of COVID can offer us opportunities. It's brought into perspective so many things. And we can, of course, around our intentionality, commit and choose to build back better, as it were, from where we are now. So rather than replacing like for like, what are we doing to reimagine what we're doing, to ideate what we're doing, to redesign some of the things we do, and particularly the ways of working that we have to encourage that greater equality and equity that we've heard about so far. And in particular, what role might emerging technology play in this context? So Dr. Ayesha Khanna is co-founder and CEO of ADDO AI, an artificial intelligence solutions firm and incubator. She's been a strategic advisor on artificial intelligence, smart cities, and fintech to leading corporations and governments. Ayesha serves on the board of Infocom Media Development Authority, the Singapore government's agency that develops and regulates its world-class technology sector to drive the country's digital economy and power its smart nation vision. There are many other things actually that Aisha is involved in, but I think one of the ones that really struck me is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Councils, a community of international experts who provide thought leadership on the impact and governance of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. Aisha is also the founder of 21st Century Girls, a charity that delivers free coding and artificial intelligence classes to girls here in Singapore. So in talking about being in a place where the decisions are made, you're well placed, of course, to talk to us about how we can build back better from COVID and the role of technology in promoting a more inclusive engagement for women post-COVID, but also in the world that the other challenges that we're dealing with as well, through that more equal access to technology and skills. So I'd like to hand over to you, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Carma. Thank you for having me here. And it's such an honor to be part of this prestigious panel. I think that the single most important thing that we can do and use technology to facilitate that is to provide the right skills to girls. Often I hear about mentoring, I hear about diversity, inclusivity, and all of these are important because of the history of bias, but nothing substitutes for a confident woman who has upskilled herself, who knows her stuff, who is better, at least as good as any man in the room. Now, that you cannot hug someone to that point or mentor someone to that point. What you can do is when they're as good or better and they're being discriminated against, you can step in our position and say, no, that's not right. She is the best. She is better than the best that we have available. But what I find is that what we are missing in our education system and even mid-career women is exposure to these advantages that they should have, which is the skills in emerging technologies such as data science, technology, and deep tech, and the ability, regardless of whether they intend to become a data scientist or not, the ability to communicate with one because they know the basics. So if they're in engineering, they must study some humanities. If they are in humanities, they must study some engineering. And neither our economy nor our education system is set up to allow that. And that's why I like UWC. My own kids go there because that flexibility is there. They've shown it to my children. And certainly I see really fantastic girls and boys there who have interests at the intersection of humanities and engineering. And they're allowed to do that work, whether in school or outside school. That flexibility, whether you are a mom or a student, that flexibility to keep learning is very important. Now in Singapore, we have done that. The government has actually allowed mid-career people, men or women, to acquire their skills while they are being paid. So you're learning, but being paid. It was very hard if you're a sole breadwinner or even a two-earner couple to step away and have the potential to learn. And that is what's needed. At a policy level, you need to always give people that little room to learn something new, even if it's not part of their career structure. In a school, you need to give them the flexibility to have a portfolio of things, even though that's not traditionally it. And for girls in particular, we must do that because they have many roles to play and they need some space to actually be able to do that. And that is my biggest belief. The more we invest in their education and flexibility in every environment, the more we set them up for success.
Thank you, Aisha, for the laying that out so very clearly, and for bringing the Singapore voice into the room. I think that that's so important around some of the challenges that we face. It's very clear there are global challenges, and we have to find global solutions, and that does mean building partnerships for the future around who has ideas, not who has the best ideas, or keeping hold of those ideas just for one party or the other, but really coming together around finding common solutions to some of the the trends that we're addressing. And your points about intersectionality, I think, also hit home for me. That idea of we need to start looking at these issues not in isolation, but how they connect to each other and address them again as with common purpose, I think is the key thing. So we're now going to move to the panel discussion, and we've had, as you heard earlier, actually many more now than 100 questions. We do have one question in the chat as well, which I'd like to try and get onto, or in the Q&A. But I thought I would set out, first of all, with the questions that were submitted in advance. We will try and answer all of them in due course, and it may be in writing after the fact, but after this event. But we'll definitely try and answer as many as we can. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists in turn, perhaps in the order that you spoke. How do you think past female leaders who fought to have women be equal to men in more ways than one would feel at today's societal image of women? Would they be proud of how far they have come, or have we gone backwards? So again, all questions submitted by our students. Margriet, would you like to take that question first?
Well, if I look at the two powerful ladies who were then preparing the conference, I think they would be disappointed, because they said in 1 or 2 generations it will be parity. And that's unfortunately not yet the case. However, if you look at now, it's so different from 25 years ago. It's now normal that you have a college president who's female, that you have a female minister. America now has a female vice president. So it's there, and it's part of our future. It's not that we have some trailblazers and everybody else is male. I think we're midway, maybe, because my goal is still the gender parity and also the racial parity and everything, because I found as an ambassador that in diverse societies we get the best solutions for climate change, for all the challenges that we all have on this earth. So I'm an optimist by nature, but I also find that we've come much further than I expected at the time. And there are a lot of women who lift me up. One warning for the girls. What I do see also at UWC is that boys can be much more confident about their skills, even if they're less than the girls. So that's something which I would say we still have to address, that you should boast a little bit more about your skills or trust in them, even if you have only 50% of what you want to acquire. So that's my sort of take for all the young ones to take away from this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Margriet. And you make an important point there around mentorship, role models, and sponsorship as well, around some of the key issues. And the discussions that there are about, that idea that sometimes girls or women might feel more like an imposter in a certain situation than men might. There's a lot of research in that area. But I think with role models like you, 3 parents in UWCSEA, our girls have got a fantastic, role models and mentors with being able to have these discussions as well. So I'm going to turn to Caroline with that question in mind. I think you're on mute, Caroline.
Sorry. With my work at AVPN, we're doing a lot of work with UN Women and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation around generation equality, which is supposed to have been last year on the 25-year anniversary, but obviously it's been slightly delayed. And I think it's really interesting, because when we look at generation equality and we look at the women that led Beijing 25 years ago, I think that this is a very different generation of women. And I think one of the things that, is inspiring when I talk to my daughter and her friends and my son and his friends is they have very different definitions even of women and gender. And I think that that is a step forward. I think that it isn't just one type of woman that is going to lead and be a leader. I think how girls and women define themselves now is different. But I think what's important is that however you define yourself, you need to be a leader and an influencer in your role and where you're moving forward. So, we tried to do we're kind of talking about creating some conversations where the women that did create the change 25 years ago are talking to the women that are poised to make the change now. And what are the lessons that they learned that can be now put into the new media and the new social media and the new norms of how to communicate and how to get that message out? So I think that the women would probably be slightly puzzled, but hopefully inspired by how the girls and women are embracing it and moving forward.
Thank you, Caroline. And the same question to Aisha.
Yeah, I think that we've made progress. What I love about the younger generation is that a sense of activism has come back to them. And activism, civic movements, not to the extreme that it's woke for no reason, but the fact that any discrimination that happens, any threat to the planet, for example, and I think UWC is so great about these good values, is not tolerated by anyone. So I hope that, after a decade or so, we're done with trying to advocate for women, but we may be advocating against ageism. We may still be advocating against racism, sexism, but hopefully as these things go away, we're always on alert that discrimination of any kind is not acceptable. And, I'm writing a book. I know these days there's a lot of awareness and climate activism, which I think is so important. And I'm writing a book with my husband on human agency in an age of artificial intelligence. And I think we'll see AI activism. And that is the value that these women who, stood up for women's rights, they didn't just stand up for women's rights. They stood up for, there was a fight against injustice of any kind, of lack of opportunity and equity. And that is what our kids are learning now. And I love that. And I think that is the key value that our ancestors will be proud of.
Thank you. Very, very important point about that activism that is clear in the hundreds of questions that we received. I just wanted to slip in, there is one very important question that's come in actually in the Q&A, and it's actually for me to answer, which is that one of my colleagues, I think, has asked, have there been any recent discussions around staff maternity and paternity leave amongst the board and leadership? And I would say not recent. I mean, I think it has actually come up in the last few days, actually, around some of the conversations there have been, I think possibly around this panel, but a number of colleagues have in the last few days raised this question. And we are looking at this whole area of, how we treat how we build equity into our contracts as well. So that is something that is, actively ongoing at the moment. So I just wanted to address that as the only question that's come in the Q&A, but a very important one for many of our colleagues, of course, as well. So the next question is to Margriet, and it is about the area of creating positive change. And how do you make people change their perspectives positively on gender equality? Are there things that you have done personally to do that?
Yeah, I tried firstly to listen, especially to the men, and ask them for help and advice. Because if you're just nagging, no husband, no man will like that. But if you ask for help and allies, and actually I find that most men are really great allies and are also considering it's in their best interest as well. What I find is that if you're a father, it helps if you tell your daughter that she's brilliant, because it will make her more positive about herself when she's older. I also find that it's nice if you are willing to get out of your comfort zone, because if you don't, you tend, even without realizing, to copy yourself. And I've seen that with myself as well. So sometimes I'm really looking for somebody who I find a little bit scary or even dislike and get part of my staff, because in the end, I know it's better for me and for my organization. And I think that's very often also beneficial to girls and to women, because especially on the technical side, a lot of organizations are still male dominated. And if you have one or two male executives willing to try to get a risk and have that female engineer, that will make a difference. Because my last point is, I think in education, it's going well with parity. If you look at a lot of universities, even technical ones, there's many more women now at universities. I think the problem is when they look for the first job. If you look at technical jobs, you see that females have more problem landing their first job than the males. So that's why I think it's good that sometimes you have the blind CVs and then try to select on basis of that. And I think there's still a lot of unconscious bias that we should sort of make visible by talking about it.
Thank you, Margriet. And I particularly liked your point also about, sometimes in our organizations, we need critical friends, those who are allies, but who are we're able to have frank and open conversations about making the change happen as well. I think that's an important point. So the next question is to Caroline, and it is, what are the ways in which we can promote gender equality within our community? And I think the intent of that question was the college community.
Right. I think that one of the things that, when I look at the college community, there are so many different groups. And I think that within the service, within the global concerns, I think it's really important to think about the community of UWC and also the wider SEA community as well. Because I think that when I see what is happening with gender equality in the region, and I think, Carma, you touched on a number of these points, you are going to see a number of girls who will not go back to school. The dropout rates in primary school and high school are already enormous. The number of girls that are now in child marriage, the different health issues, kind of livelihoods in the community. So I would encourage you, when you're looking at the global concerns and service that you're doing, to really think about, how can you advocate within that for the wider gender equality within the community? Because it's going to have, COVID is what they call a pandemic with a long tail. And it is going to be years when we're still realizing the impact that the pandemic has had on issues like gender equality. So, as you kind of progress during the school and as you graduate, just be really conscious of how you can advocate for gender in the wider community as well.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. Very important points there about some specific actions that could be taken in our community. And I'm sure our students will, if we ask that question back, within service and global concerns, we're getting lots of ideas as well. So the next question, I'm going to ask this of Aisha, if I may, which is, how can we move from what can often be seen as rivalry amongst women to supporting each other, being allies for each other as well?
That was a myth that's been running around, that we are all like cats fighting each other. But this is absolutely not true. Of course, when you're teenagers and all these hormones going on, you have disagreements. But when you're older and as you go into high school, and you will find fantastic groups of women out there. And we really support each other. There are ecosystems of girls and women in fintech and data science and arts. And that was one of the ways, and continues to be one of the ways, that I draw so much of my networking, my information, my camaraderie, my relatability. Just this morning, I was at a breakfast. I met 6 amazing women. And, we all had great fun, talked about our lives as moms, but also as CEOs. And I'm already going to collaborate with 3 of them. So, don't believe it. It's not true. Women have rivalry with men and with women, and that's healthy. But there's no backbiting or cat fights or anything like that. What we need to learn is don't be shy about asking for help. I always notice that my cousins and my husband, and they can switch between playing tennis and then talking business. And it was more difficult for me. I found it hard to ask for favors, or didn't know how to step into business and social. But I'm getting better at it, and I think younger women are also getting better at it. And that's the key. Don't think socializing and business, it's the same thing. So talk about what you love to do, and don't take your experience that you may have in high school or middle school as representative. I mean, those are sometimes tough years because you're young. But as soon as you go and hopefully grow older, and even in school, you'll find that girls help each other a lot.
Good. Thank you. That's very positive. I mean, I must say in my previous professional life, often those networks for women to both support and challenge each other were very significant support structures as well. As you say, that idea that you can build a network which can be both social, and I think we've seen the benefits of connectivity, particularly with COVID, that importance of having some networks that you can communicate with and have to support, but also to be able to use those for professional purposes as well. And traditionally, those networks have often been very male dominated within particular sectors perhaps as well. But increasingly, I think people seeing the benefits of having the different perspectives, the different genders represented there. I wondered, Margriet, if you wanted to answer that question. I mean, have you come across very specifically, if you feel able to answer this in your context, female rivalry at work, or have you found it not competitive, but more being able to kind of, connect with each other to lift each other up?
Well, the honest answer is when I started to work as a junior diplomat, I thought that the other young females were my competitors. And I was a little bit scared of them because they were so awesomely good. And I tried to be bitchy to get my position. And then after a couple of years, I thought, what am I doing? I'm really very not happy with this situation, and it doesn't help me either. Then I've decided to change my attitude in seeing them as my main allies. And they've been that ever since. So I had a misconception that it was not a win-win. And I've decided to change that, and now also giving back, paying it forward, especially to younger women, and try to help them, give them advice, ask them to be bolder. And what I've learned as well, and that's an advice I'd like to share with all of you, is that in the beginning I tried to do my utmost so much that I was the last one in the office, and I skipped on socializing, and that was not a smart move, because as Aisha is saying, it's part of the job. And actually, people like you better, you connect better, and you also have better results. So I've changed that as well. And especially as an ambassador, there's a lot of socializing and going up and about. So I like my job a lot in that respect. But it's work, and it's part of connectivity. So sometimes I just don't finish, or tell my daughter, well, better not finish the homework, do something nice. And then she tells me, you're not a good mother. I should get good grades. And I said, well, I doubt it. Really, I think it's great that UWC is having so many students who are excellent and having 7s on all their topics. But I'm not going to hire you because you have the 7s. I'm going to hire you because you have a sort of sparkly personality. You can combine humanities and tech or something else. So it's much broader than that.
And Carma,
Caroline, please.
So I just wanted to build on those two comments, because in some countries, when we lived in Istanbul, for example, there wasn't a women's network and a women's professional network. So, I helped start one. So there's also options because I do believe that networking and women's networking is so important. And there's always people you can reach out to who are also interested in that. And you only need 5 people, four or 5 people to start something. And then they ask people, and then, through that way, you will meet people you like, you will meet people that you collaborate with. I mean, for sure, you'll meet people that you don't like so much, but it's all part of the fun of really kind of reaching out and being a positive influence on each other. Because yes, there is negativity, but I think you can counter that with positivity.
Thank you. Well, you introduce a very important point there, Caroline, around sort of potentially some cultural differences around how, gender bias or gender equality issues are considered. So one of the questions that came in that I wanted to ask of all of you was, in some cultures, some traditions can be seen as sexist. Where do we draw the line between respecting cultures? And we have 100 different nationalities in our context, so many different, very, very varied cultural backgrounds. How do we draw the line between respecting cultures and advocating for gender equality? I'm going to start with Aisha on that one, if I may.
Well, I don't think that gender equality, access to equal opportunity should be constrained by culture. So it's something I believe in, and I would always advocate for it. However, if there are women who decide not to do that, not to pursue certain opportunities, you can't force anyone. What you can do is help to create the environment rather than pushing people. And however I can create the environment where that opportunity, access to equal opportunity is there, that is my interest. And there is no country, no place where I would say that is any other environment is acceptable to me. So I believe that that is a moral imperative, and we should definitely pursue it wherever we are.
Thank you. Passing to Margriet, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, I think one of the main objectives I have is that you can be a good mother and a good professional. And very often, especially for females, that's a hindrance in different cultures, because then first and foremost, you're seen as the mother, and that comes with a lot of responsibilities, like staying at home or making sure that your kids are behaving well. And it's always towards the female and not towards the male that responsibility is for. So that's what I've been advocating about, like you can be both, like you can be a good father and a good executive at the same time. So, but you have to join forces. And I think that goes for many cultures, but what I've learned that sometimes cultures that are less progressive than the Dutch culture are better at that kind of notion than we are. So I've also tried to listen and come up with good examples of other cultures in my own country and show to them it's possible. Like, I've seen it in Iran or countries where you don't expect anything like that, but you can come up with good sort of examples. So I'm trying to learn from other cultures and always ask for people, can you give me some advice or what works for you?
Thank you. And Caroline?
Yeah, I think it's about listening, because I think that it is easy to meet people who feel differently about issues like gender equality and talk to them and tell them why they should think differently. And I think that listening to where they are coming from, because they may also be fighting for gender equality, but in different ways and framing it in different ways than what you are used to. So I think that in those circumstances, the listening part and the understanding, and then placing it within a framework that you can see where they are coming from and how you can help them is really important.
I agree. It's good that we're all aligned on that one, I think. So I have a question which I know is relevant to all of us. I know that you three are parents in the college. I also have 2 children as well. And one of the questions that came in was, it is said that successful women often have to compromise on their desire to have a family if they want to excel at the workplace. Is that true? How can we change our mindset regarding this matter and prove that success doesn't hinder aspirations of having a family? So you're all in very high-powered jobs. So how would you answer that question? I start with Caroline this time.
I think it's very important to know yourself and to know your limitations. And I mean, for example, for myself, I saw my professional career as a long goal. And for many years, for probably 8-10 years, for a number of reasons, I wasn't able, because of my family situation, to work full time. But I made it a point to do the best volunteer work I could do during that time, to make sure that when I was in a position to go back to full-time work and a professional career, that I was putting myself in that best situation. I think that, yeah, I mean, I think it's true for men and women. I think that really successful people in careers do make compromises all the time. And I think it's frustrating that women are seen or asked the question more than men, I suppose, as to, you know, did they have to, what choices did they make? Because I think everybody makes choices. And I think that from a woman's perspective, it's just really important to know yourself and to know what you're capable of and where you want to go, and just be firm about that with your family, with your workplace, and with yourself.
Thank you. Aisha?
Yes, I think this is a very important question. And I hope that none of the young women who are listening think that there is, any question about this. You can have a family and you can be successful, but there are some trade-offs. For example, for me, I'm never going to be a multi-bazillionaire because there are some things I would not give up. And this is exactly what Caroline is saying. There's some choices that you make. And I've discovered that happiness is about trying to achieve balance. And most of my 20s and 30s, I was a very extreme person, working very hard, or then being very intense. And I think that one is younger, one is like that. But if there's any advice I could give my children and all the young women I meet, is that, your health, there is no question it matters. And your fitness, your spiritual health, and your family relationships, your friends, they matter as much as your achievements do. And that leads to longer, people live longer and they live happier. So one person I met gave a very good example. She said, and I see kids doing this too, you're juggling many balls all the time. And we're all juggling them, men and women. But some of the balls are rubber balls and some are glass balls. And now your health, your exercise, your sleep, your nutrition, your family, they're glass balls. You don't want them to fall. But if you take an exam, like Margriet was saying, you didn't do that well on it, that's okay. You'll do it again. Your career, you missed a promotion, that's okay. Failure is not a problem. But you have to balance yourself a little bit. And that's coming from, some things that you learn over time, which is saying no to certain things. So I read in a book that some women block their calendars and say, this is the time for my kids. And so I started following that as well, so that my team now knows, oh, Aisha's picking up her kids, or she's having dinner with her kids. And I don't feel guilty about it. And, my clients deal with it. So you have to set certain boundaries. And I would just say, don't be extreme, because success comes from consistency over time. And that's something which, I wish I had known earlier. I would have invested in these glass balls sooner, but now I'm trying to do that. So, and if you do that, then you can have many different aspects of your life that give you a lot of pleasure. And that's very important, to live a whole life. Aristotle said the golden mean, where you want to have many things. You want to have a meaningful, full life. And that is not by being extremely popular or extremely successful or being a great mother. It's actually a balance of these things.
I agree. I mean, I think it's interesting when I first started, in my professional life, balance was often talked about as being a sort of 50-50 thing. And actually at different stages in your life and your career and so on, that balance may look very different. And I very much respect the fact you talked about trade-offs. And whereas I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, we talked about compromises. And actually, of course, if you're in a partnership, you're compromising and so on. But a way of kind of thinking of it that I have found helpful, I'm a single mother of two girls, is not to think that this is something 50-50. The best way of dealing with that guilt, because for a while I had a very busy job and two young kids and felt permanently guilty in the office and permanently guilty at home and so on. But as the kids grew up, I realized that actually the trade-off that I had made was that from a very early age, my daughters became very, very confident in quite the surroundings that I was working in as well. And in fact, just as a small aside, my younger daughter, who I adopted when she was 6, and her first word in English was actually cheers, because she was working I was a diplomat at the time, and she was joining in, at home we had all these receptions and things, and she would go around with the snacks, and actually that is how she learned English. Actually, she learned cheers, and then she learned, would you like a nibble, and so on. But I think it's that point about, the trade-offs that actually you do start to see at some point this incredible impact of the building of the confidence and so on in young people, and a pride around having a whereas maybe when they're a bit younger they maybe cling to your leg as you're leaving the house, but actually a little bit older they start to really relish the fact that you are a strong woman who's respected in a professional way. That I think is something to hold on to, that it does change. So Margriet, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's really good that we are here all having kids and all role models, because first I thought I could only have a career as a female without kids, because the few women I knew who were leading when I was younger were single and just chose for their career because that was the only option at the time. And I think that's now quite different. And what I do in the workforce for my staff that are parents, tell them, you can juggle your time. You don't have to be in the office all the time. And I think that's the one positive about the COVID epidemic, because now working from home is not something which is not possible anymore. It's the new normal. And I think that's very helpful for a lot of parents, because they can now maybe get their kids from school and then do their office work from 9 to 11 p.m. at their desk. And I don't care as long as they have the results. Actually, I think it's better for the balance. So I try to be open to anybody, that you don't have to be the same, not just for gender, but also not from working hours, from where you are working. Some of them are early birds and other ones have a different sort of layout. I'm not sure whether you have the same, but I think this is for the benefit for both males and females that we change that.
Yeah. Thank you, Margriet. So we've had a couple of, I know we need to wrap up in 5 minutes or so, but there's a couple of very interesting comments in the Q&A, whether there is room for workplaces, or surely there is room for workplaces to respond to some of these challenges by creating more flexibility for parents, as opposed to it being solely the parents' responsibility to balance their time. Are some workplaces set up for non-parents to thrive? So the idea of, those without children, what are the opportunities or insights can parents add to an organization? And how can being a parent actually benefit someone's career? And also whether or not it's time to change the narrative about parenting being a career sacrifice and shifting it to being something that enhances your career. So I wonder, one of those is around workplaces, and obviously in the context of the college. I would like in slower time perhaps to respond to that one with colleagues. But I wonder if each of you in turn could just maybe say one thing that your current workplace, your colleagues are doing to support both parents and non-parents to thrive in the workplace. Caroline, would you like to start us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the flexibility to do the work, we provide a flexibility to do the work that we want you to do, that you've agreed to us to do. So the contract, I suppose, in any time. So if you need to take some time off in the afternoon to spend with your children, but you commit to doing the work at another time, then that's absolutely fine. I think that what we're trying to get away from is that it's a 9 to 5 role, and more that you have agreed to do a job, and therefore, as long as that job gets done, and you're able to meet with colleagues and you're able to meet with our members when you need to, it is up to you as to when you choose to do that work. Now, there's always constraints because, you know, our members and some of the other staff are always working during the day, but we do believe that flexibility is key to being able to achieve that.
Thank you. And Margriet?
I actually find that parents bring something extra. So I agree with the idea that you need diversity in the workplace, so not just singles or people who are in their 20s or their 30s. And sometimes I ask questions when I ask for new staff, like, which soccer team do you favor? Because then you get different sort of teams in the workplace, and especially in the Dutch, it's very important. And here it would be, are you Liverpool or Manchester, and see what comes out of that. But I find that being open to that, ask them what they learned. It should be a safe workplace. So people should be able to share, like, oh, I'm sorry, my kid is having a tough day at school or is sick. Can I work from home? And say, sure, only if there's something special return, and that they don't hesitate to be open about that part of their life. And I'm proud that we have that kind of workplace.
And Aisha?
Yes, I mean, I would just echo what Margriet and Caroline said. Absolutely, flexibility is the key. I find that parents will really appreciate that, and then they will give it, they'll be very productive in the other time. So it actually does not affect their productivity at all, in my opinion. And so one should be flexible, but then it's hard to be flexible for small businesses when they only have a few people and each one has a role. So it's become easier for us now that we're about 100 people and growing than it was when we were like 10 people. So, I understand it's challenging, but one should try to do it as much as possible.
And I'm looking at it, of course, from the college perspective. There's a whole different discussion, of course, around teachers and the balance there between the requirements of the teaching calendar and the rhythm of the college as well is something that I've understood, better in the last year than I did when I first started. I think those are very important points. So I wondered if just, give you each a minute before we wrap up, just to say if there's one final thought you'd like to leave all of our audience. We've kept a good number of the audience with us as we've gone on, so there's a lot of interest in hearing what you have to share. If I can just turn to you all, starting again with Margriet, maybe just for a minute, just tell us one thought you'd like to leave with, particularly the young students, boys and girls, who are listening to us today.
Be brave, be bold, also challenge us, because I think you are really the future of the new world where you have to fight climate change, still a lot of racism, gender disparity. So it's not that you found the perfect world to enter into. And I try to listen to you because I think you come up with good ideas, set them online because that's what you're very good at. Keep on your Instagram accounts and everything, because it does inspire me and probably a lot of other leaders as well.
Thank you. And Caroline?
Yeah, I think that kind of going back, I think that the world is going to have a probably difficult time over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think that inequality as a whole, particularly income inequality, because of the COVID, because of the pandemic, is going to be accentuated. And I think that it would be great as you go out into the world, just to remember, where did you come from? What opportunities did UWC give to you that you can then use to see how you can support doing better for other people as you move forward? And I think that that's a responsibility we all have. And when you see gender inequality, think about it, ask the right questions, frame it within what you know, and then think about how you might be able to take 1 or 2 steps to make that better.
Thank you. And Aisha, I'll give you the final word.
Look, I would say change is coming. Every industry is going to be disrupted by technology, and you need to know a little bit about it. All of you, all of us on this panel, everybody. And that doesn't mean, you should not study your literature and your philosophy. Of course, if you want to be a filmmaker, an actor, a chef, but anything you do, you will encounter artificial intelligence, robots, virtual reality, and you should not be afraid. The worst thing is when somebody's talking about this and then you shy away. You think, I don't know. Okay, she must be right. The machine must be right. Learn a little bit so you can be part of that conversation and you can build the services and products of the future. And the only way you can do that is on your own or with the help of your teachers or your parents. Study technology, some computer science, some robotics will take you a long way. Always keep adapting and you will never need to worry about your future if you do that.
Thank you for that fantastic encouragement, those final words there. And I would echo everything that you've said, everybody has said today, which is really be bold, be strong, and challenge. That is the theme for today as well. So thank you to our 3 panelists, Margriet, Caroline, and Aisha, for joining us today. And thank you for genuinely being such inspiring women who themselves inspire other women and the boys that will be working with our students, female students in the future. Thank you for your time, and we hope it sparks some thinking amongst our students and our audience more widely. And I will come back to all of those who submitted questions to answer them in due course. So thank you very much for your time today, and have a good International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.